In this demonstration, I'll describe the steps used within the Design tab. The Design tab is where we will modify the AFO. First thing we'll do is go to this drop-down arrow. Within here, we have our wizards. We're going to select the AFO modification wizard or stack. So left-click that. It appears here, and these are all the steps that we're going to use to modify the AFO. First step, we'll left-click, plantar flex, dorsiflex, the foot and ankle. So right-click and pull the mouse toward yourself, and that will make it a little bit smaller so that we can see the entire AFO. Then right-click and tilt the AFO upright so that the leg or calf section goes completely vertical. There's a couple different ways we can ensure that the calf section is entirely vertical. One is to see that the red line that's coming off the top of the AFO is perfectly in line or parallel to one of the grid lines in the back. Again, try not to left click, make sure you right click, and that is what is going to tilt this from right to left. Again, use your eye and make sure that this calf section is perfectly vertical. Once you have it vertical, left click the up and down arrow on the goniometer and bring the foot section downward. Using the grid pattern, our goal here is to look at these grids, these boxes, which are all 1 inch square, and we want the ball of the foot to be approximately 1/2 to 5/8 of an inch lower than the heel. Again, there's a little bit of estimating that is involved here, but in the end, when we're done modifying, we're going to make sure that our AFO, once it's in a shoe, will stand vertical. So we're going to go a little bit more than 1/2 an inch now, again estimating that our heel is going to be higher than the ball of the foot. So currently I have this plantar flexed 4 degrees. I'm going to go a little bit more than that because as we work through our wizard, we're going to end up trimming off part of this foot plate. All right, so I have it about 5 degrees right now. We're going to leave it at about that point. So again, the heel has to be higher than the ball of the foot. Again, using the grid pattern, my heel is slightly below this grid line and slightly above that grid line. So as long as you're in the area of 3/4 to 5/8 of an inch lower at the ball of the foot than the heel, you're going to be pretty close. I'm going to move on to the pronation supination. We'll click that. We have a grid at the top. We're going to pull that out of our way. Right click, pull the mouse toward yourself, and that will zoom out the model. Again, we want to get the calf section vertical. You can right click and tilt it from left to right to get the calf section vertical. Then go to the goniometer, grab the left and right arrows, and now we're going to pronate the foot left and right. Prior to doing that, we're going to left click and tilt the foot down so that the ball of the foot is slightly higher than the heel. All right, again, ensuring and making sure that the calf section is perfectly straight up and down. Again, you can look at the red line, make sure that it's parallel to the grid pattern, and then tilt your forefoot so that it is parallel to the grid lines. With this parallel to the grid lines, it should then also be perpendicular to the line of your limb, okay? Not necessarily parallel to the Achilles tendon. The heel is in valgus. We're never going to get, if the heel's in valgus, the Achilles tendon will also be following that same line. So we need to get the ball of the foot parallel to the grid line and perpendicular to the line of the patient's limb. Now we have the forefoot square. We can move on to the remove material step. Here we're going to work on the shape of the foot plate. The arch of this scan looks pretty good. So the medial longitudinal arch doesn't need a lot of work, but we really have no transverse arch. So we're going to create one. We're going to move the tool width up to 1.5 inches, fixed depth, and we're going to go to 3/16 of an inch in terms of our carved depth. This marker is the third metatarsal head. Here is our first metatarsal head. We're going to start by working from this point back. We don't want to carve into the med heads. We're going to stay behind them. I'm going to get up as high as we can, stay behind that first med head, and then work in kind of a straight line from this point. So this is our transverse arch. I'm now going to go down to 1/8 of an inch. Because we have a pretty good metatarsal support already along this medial longitudinal arch, I don't want to increase it too much more than that. So I'm going to move my tool back here and just increase the medial longitudinal arch another 1/8 of an inch. Bring it back to the back of the heel or front of the heel, depending on your perspective. Go into the field, spin the model around, and I want to avoid the navicular and avoid that first med head. So come into here, and that's pretty much all I need to do. Just lightly remove some more material there. I'm going to go down to the blend tool, left click. I'm going to change the size up to 2 inch, and now I'm just going to blend this back together, soften all of these edges. So blending is kind of a combination of softening and removing and adding material. So you want to work quickly with this tool. When I get back to this front edge here, I'm going to make this a 1 inch or small blending tool. You can zoom this out. Wrong button, undo that, right click and soften this front edge. All right, that looks good. So this is the beginning of my transverse arch modification and medial longitudinal arch, that's a pretty good arch already. I don't think we need to increase it any further than that. All right, we're going to move on to the next step where we're adding material. Initially, I'm going to work on adding material over both left and right or medial and lateral malleoli. I'm going to start on the medial side and add a 3/16 inch buildup over the medial malleoli. So I'm going to start about 1.25 inches above the medial side. Move this back to a medium blend. And just work around the edges. Spin around, that looks just fine. Go to the lateral side. I'm only going to add 1/8 inch to the lateral side because this patient is a pronator and they're falling away from this side. Stick with a 2 inch blend, right click, and blend these edges. Right over the top. Okay. Now, the rest of these, I'm going to take my tool width down to 1 inch. Calcaneal tuberosity, quick. It'll build up there. That looks fine. Base of the 5th metatarsal. Blend that together. Move over to the navicular. And blend that together. So those are the majority of the buildups I need to do with the exception of the 1st and 5th mat heads. The first met head, I'm actually going to add a 5/16 inch buildup, and I'm going to increase the tool size to 1 1/3 or 1 3/8. Here, we're going to actually put a pretty good sized buildup in this area, because what I'm trying to do here is create a flare for that first met head to come out. There. So we do this, and now I'm just going to blend this side. And what I'm after here is to create this flare. Our trim lines will come down on the back side of that first met head to let it out of our brace. So all I'm trying to do, so here's our 5th, is to create a flare to let both of these out. I'm going to hit posterior and then just zoom this out. Excuse me, I'm going to hit lateral and then zoom this out. This side I'm going to use less because there's already a decent flare on this side, and I don't need this big of a tool. We're going to go down to 1 inch, maybe 1 1/8 will be fine. So same thing, I'm just going to kind of pile on a bunch right here and then blend off this back side, creating this flare and this flare. That's all I need to do. My buildups are done. I'm going to go to raise and lower the toes. These toes are kind of pointing up in the air. This is a nice feature that Willow has added. I can take this and it'll drop these toes down a little bit. This helps when adding this toe box. We're going to add the toe box now. I'm going to zoom it out, tilt this down. You have this series of little circles here. What's nice, if you can sneak one of these around to the other side, and then we can use it on the plantar surface of the foot. We're going to try to sneak that one around if we can, and we're going to leave this back a little ways. Take a peek. Excellent. And we're going to do the same thing over here. So we're going to take this one and sneak it around, get it to the apex. And as far as the dorsum of the foot goes, we're not as concerned about that. Where it's nice is if we can get one of the couple extra markers on the bottom, you can get these markers right at that flare where our trim line is going to end up being. I'm just going to go just a little bit further back, right in there. That looks good. So what I'm looking at is this flare that we've created by adding on a fair amount of material there. All right, that looks just fine. Now I'm going to hit this button. It's going to flip it back over. Where we started our transverse arch, we're going to place these markers right along that ridge. That actually looks good, so we're going to bring it back around. So our trim lines are going to come here. 5th met head is going to come out of the brace. 1st met head is going to come out of the brace. And we have that little flare created now by adding those buildups before. We're going to spin this around. Now, over on the side we have a series of these sliders. We're going to grab the top one and we're going to max it out. And look what happens. We create our toe box. Okay, we're going to skip the second one, go to the third one, but I'm going to zoom this out a little bit because now this will extend our toe box and make it longer for us. And this is the slickest thing in the world. Okay, we don't need the full length. We'll go most of the length of that. I mean, you can go as long as you want. And our toe plate will end up coming out this way. We'll trim it off and cut off some of these corners. We don't need the whole thing, but we have our flares now, and we have our full foot plate. Okay, and it goes right up to our transverse arch. The last step will come back and detail and increase the depth of our transverse arch that we've already started. Okay, we can flip this down, zoom it out, and get a better look at how this looks now. And that's pretty slick. Okay, the other thing we're going to do is cut the planar surface with this cutting blade. Whatever you do right now, don't left click because you'll tilt this out of position. We're going to right click and tilt this forward. We need to tilt this up, so right click and tilt it a little bit. We need to get our brace vertical. Our heel is still higher than the forefoot, and bring this up, and the ideal amount is approximately 3/16 to 1/4 of an inch, so we can get the bottom of that foot plate perfectly flat. So go to about 3/16. It tells us right over here the cut depth. All right, and we have about 1/2 an inch underneath the heel of that foot. So come up here to cut, pull your screen down, and then we'll take a look at the bottom of that, and now it's perfectly flat. Perfect. That's exactly what we want. We're going to go to the next step, which is the anterior opening. There's another slider. We're going to pull that up or to the right, and it just creates a flat spot on the AFO. The purpose of this is it does a couple things. It helps to reinforce the AFO when you're pulling it, and two, it makes it easier to get the plastic off this dense foam. We're going to move on to dorsal opening. It does the same thing to the top of the foot or the dorsal aspect of the foot. Do this one until it matches this part here at the instep. That's all we need to do. Again, it makes it easier to get it off. The last step is modifications to the planar surface of the foot. Actually kind of hit planar surface, it flips it over so we can see it in the right perspective. Go to 1.5 inches, fixed depth, and you can either do 3/16 or we're going to do 3/16 because I think we can go that far on this one. Again, start your carve back a ways and left click, and we're going to just detail this out a little bit. And it's purely that transverse arch part of the foot. And let's go with a 1-inch blend. We're just going to go right around these edges. And this again just helps to detail out this foot plate. Okay, and that's a nice looking foot plate. First mat head, fifth mat head, third mat head's up there. And if you've ever worn foot orthotics, you know the importance of a transverse arch. And now we have that in our AFO. This is complete. You can zoom this back out. Any areas like here, you can soften that up. Again, go back to a 2-inch blend. The only other thing that we can do here is if you want to do a global reduction and remove material to tighten up just the global calf area, go to 1.5 inches, or you can max this out. Go to just 1/8 of an inch and just globally, oops, we have this at 0, go to 1/8 of an inch and globally stay above the medial and lateral malleoli, globally tighten this calf section up. And if you have and this is not a large individual here, if you have a really fleshy patient, you can tighten this up, again, what you see fit. You can go at 3/16, 1/4 on a larger patient. Okay, so I'm just going to go around and globally tighten up this soft tissue area. Staying above everywhere I've modified the medial and lateral malleoli. Okay, so I've now done a global reduction in the soft tissue area, and then I'm just going to simply use my, again, I can go to a larger 3-inch blend, and main areas that I want to blend together are down here. And any other areas. This is outside my trim, but I'll blend this anyway. There we go. Now that is completely modified and finished, ready to go to the carver. Okay, if I want to do a little blending right there, and done. Okay, so that is it. That is how you can modify using CAD. Quick, easy, and done.